everybody, my name is Max Conserva. This is Logan Farr, and we're here on behalf of Crossroads Adaptive Athletics. And today we're going to take you through the squat for lower limb impairments. So when we're talking about lower limb impairments, most commonly what we see are a fixed ankle, so that's no range of motion in the ankle, and also inability to drive with that ankle at all and resist knee flexion. In addition to that, what we see is also just a general difficulty with balance, especially in Logan's place. He actually is a bilateral, so both legs are amputated. Let's now see how those complications actually impact the squat. Logan, could you mind stepping forward here and show me what your squat looks like? Come back up to the top. I'm gonna have you pause right there. So you can immediately see with that lack of range of motion, what ends up happening is he comes up on his heels. So this is something that's unavoidable. If you're dealing with a unilateral BK amputee, you're gonna only have one side coming up on the heel and the other side's gonna be a sound side, heel will be flat on the ground. So what this leads to is a lack of engagement in the posterior chain and also difficulty with balance. Logan, go ahead and stand up. So what we often do with our athletes as we get started with the squat is progress them through the box squat. And right behind Logan, we have a box. We can take the athlete through various heights, starting from a high box to a low box, ultimately trying to reach down to hips at parallel. Once they've reached that distance, we can hopefully remove the box for a BK amputee. For a bilateral and AK, we're most likely always going to use the box. Now that we've talked about the box squat with no bar, we're now moving into what it looks like actually with the bar in the back. I'm going to have Logan give me a back squat and come back up. One more time. And come back up. Pause there. So again, you'll notice he's unable to keep full ground compliance with his foot. He can't keep his heels down. You'll also notice that he's sitting down on the box. So I also look at this as a progression. Ultimately, I'd love to see our athletes just use the box as a touch and go. This gives two purposes for the box. One, to check the depth to make sure we're hitting the height we want to. And second, as a bailout mechanism, if we start to lose our balance, we have somewhere to sit down. With Logan's case, I would not recommend touch and go, simply for the fact that both feet are now on their toes, and so it's incredibly difficult to balance. So we have him actually pause at the bottom of the box squat, more like a traditional box squat, where he's working basically the descent separately and then the ascent separately. When we start talking about the front squat, you'll actually find with many amputees, BKs, bilateral BKs, they actually prefer the front squat to the back squat. With the weight further forward in Logan's chest, as he drops down into the descent, one of the common problems he has is once he's on his toes, if he rocks back to his heels, there's a good possibility he's dumping backwards. But now with the weight on the front, he has a way to counterbalance a little bit with that active weight. So typically you'll find when you're going heavy in a squat and you're trying to hit a PR, a lot of amputees actually hit higher front squats than back squats, which is the reverse of what you typically see in your gym. Logan, would you mind hitting a couple front squats? Beautiful. The last squat we should talk about is the overhead squat. This is an incredibly complicated movement. I'm not actually going to ask Logan to perform it. It's complicated for any athlete because it's requiring full ankle flexion, full hip flexion, full shoulder mobility. The difficulty with amputees are if you do not have that full upright position with your shoulders and fully open hips, every complication you have upstairs translates downstairs like we see with all athletes, except we have a much more tenuous situation with a BK or a bilateral BK. So this is a very elite movement, and I don't recommend teaching this to athletes until they're very far down the progression, much longer than you work with another athlete. More of like a stunt maneuver than something actually working transitional skills. The last topic we'd like to talk about is now that we're squatting, one of the problems we do end up seeing, not in Logan's case since he has an equal injury on both sides, but in someone like my case or another BK or AK is oftentimes it's really easy for those athletes to compensate heavily. You keep it down in hang position. Compensate heavily by using their sound side, impinging their hip, and basically letting this guy come along with the free ride. So to try to get around that, we love to see some auxiliary work, specifically glute ham bridges, to make sure that number one, they are working both sides, and number two, they're always cueing in on how to fire that glute and how to fire those hamstrings. Now that we have Logan on the ground, we're going to walk through the glute hamstring bridge. So again, this is an auxiliary exercise to make sure we're engaging both sides and not biasing the sound side as we're squatting. So what I'm going to ask Logan to do before we start here is to bring his hips straight up to his hand, the whole time thinking about tightening his butt, getting his hips high as possible. So Logan, let's take your hips all the way to the top. Push, push, push. Tight butt. Yep. Go ahead and bring your butt down. Give me 2 more up to the top. 1 more. And back down. So an easy rule of thumb is to try to marry the volume of the squat with the volume of the glute bridges. So 5 by 5 squat system, 5 glute bridges in between each set.